did the WWE know in advance? I kind of think. But did they jump the gun on the tribute show? Fucking absolutely. But what else could they have done? The news was out that Benoit was dead, and they had to address it that night somehow. Continuing the storylines as normal and just giving him a quick segment, or not even talking about it at all, wouldn't have been very respectful. But it was sadly too late to change course once the circumstances of Benoit's death came to light, because they came forward right in the middle of the tribute show. Now, I think if they knew the circumstances and knew it was a murder-suicide ahead of time, they just wouldn't have ran that tribute show, because it made the WWE look very, very bad. But why did Benoit turn heel on his wife and son? Marital strife has been a persistent theory due to allegations of Nancy suspecting Benoit of having an affair with one of the WWE divas. But the couple also had difficulties with Daniel, who is believed to have Fragile X syndrome. The resulting cognitive issues would have been hard to manage, especially with a stressful life on the road. But track marks were also found on Daniel's arm, suggesting that he was injected with human growth hormone to compensate for stunted growth. Another possible trigger for Benoit may have been pressure to stop wrestling. WWE had offered him a backstage role, but David and Nancy asked him to retire because it clearly hadn't been good for him since Eddie died. However, Benoit was firmly against the idea because wrestling was all he knew, though he did consider opening a wrestling school in Atlanta at Nancy's behest. We also can't rule out depression and grief, since a substantial part of Benoit clearly died with Eddie. However, the context of Benoit's life towards the end plays second fiddle to the elephant in the room: chemical and medical problems. In addition to the bodies, the police found alcohol all over the house. There were beer cans in the bins and a half-empty bottle of wine in the gym. And Benoit's nickname, the Rabid Wolverine, took on a bit of an uncomfortable new meaning when it was found out that his testosterone was 10 times higher than the normal level, and that he had Xanax and hydrocodone in his system. The high T levels may have been due to treatment for a deficiency, likely due to previous steroid use, as he also had an enlarged heart that would probably have given out in about 10 months regardless of his mental state. However, the authorities were quick to dismiss roid rage as the cause of the tragedy, because Benoit's actions that night were far too deliberate. As I'm sure Vince was very willing to point out, he said there is no correlation between taking steroids and what happened to Chris Benoit. Human beings are flawed. You don't fucking say, Vince, but anyway, he continued, Chris went nuts. It happens in every form of life and everything, so that's the only thing I can take away from it. So in other words, Benoit just did it for no reason. But just because it most likely wasn't roids that sent Benoit over the edge doesn't mean that it wasn't a massive problem that he was mixed up in. In February of 2007, a sting operation revealed an online steroid ring based in Arizona and run by Dr. David Wilbert, which named clients such as Kurt Angle, Edge, who tried them while recovering from a neck injury but quit when they slowed him down, Eddie Guerrero, whose steroid use enlarged his heart and contributed to his death, Rey Mysterio, and Randy Orton. Look, man, I love you to death, but those quads aren't fooling me. I'm jealous though. And while Benoit wasn't directly named in this scandal, Nancy herself clearly knew what was up before she died, and she was not happy about the fact that the WWE wasn't helping him to get off of all of the performance enhancers that he was taking. As text to her husband read, I will not accept this steroid-induced roller coaster ride of emotional abuse. Ignoring the problem or running away isn't going to help you face it. You need professional help, and only if you're fully honest about all of it. Get off the stuff. I'm probably not the only one who can see, and we both know the wellness program is a joke. The wellness policy that was set up in the wake of Eddie Guerrero's death was not exactly fit for purpose, as it was far too easy for wrestlers to get medical exemptions for banned substances, hence painkiller addiction being a huge problem in the wrestling industry. You know the drill that Dr. Feelgoods employ. Patients mention keywords like chronic pain and they get prescribed with anything and everything that they want. In 2009, Benoit's physician, Dr. Phil Aston, was sentenced to 10 years for illegally prescribing restricted meds to patients, including 17 wrestlers. In the year leading up to his death, Aston wrote Benoit prescriptions for a 10-month supply of testosterone 7 times. Benoit took 70 months worth of testosterone in a single year. But while that was surely a recipe for disaster in very many ways, it wasn't the straw that caused Benoit to snap. He actually visited Aston the Friday before he died and, quote, he certainly didn't show any signs of any distress or rage or anything. I'm still very surprised and shocked, especially with his child Daniel involved. But if it wasn't the roids that did it, then what? Well, it was probably all in Benoit's head. Neuroscientist and two-time WWE Hardcore Champion Christopher Nowinski, who retired after a year of post-concussion syndrome, had another idea. He noted a lot of similarities in Benoit's story to those of American footballers he was looking into. And after getting Benoit's brain more closely examined by a neurosurgeon, he was very quickly proven right. Now, the top image there is a healthy brain, and the bottom one is Benoit's brain. Don't worry about the different colours, that's just how the samples were stained for visibility. But look at all of the dark spots in Benoit's brain tissue. They are called neurofibrillary tangles, and they are a sign of something very, very bad. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, disrupts brain functions and causes atrophy in a manner similar to and often resulting in dementia. It can also cause aggression and depression and is all too common in boxers, American football players and professional wrestlers. In Benoit's case, it was the result of too many concussions from chair shots, being dropped on his head, or worse, being dropped onto his head onto a chair, as well as his signature flying headbutt, which he even did from the top of a ladder and a steel cage. I mean, it looked really, really cool, but also fucking why? By the way, the Dynamite Kid's use of the flying headbutt actually led to spine issues that crippled him later in life and likely contributed to his death. Some tribute that was. And after more concussions than Benoit himself admitted he could count, the 40-year-old was found to have the brain of an 85-year-old with Alzheimer's. Benoit's brain was so banged up, fucked and melted away that by the time he died, it would have been the same size as mine. Now, understanding of CTE was only just emerging at the time, and mainly in the NFL. So the WWE could have easily played all of this as a tragic but teachable moment that would inform policy going forward. But no, they just had to cover their own arses, saying that someone with the brain of an 85-year-old with dementia would be unable to keep a travelling work schedule, drive himself to arenas, and perform intricate manoeuvres in the ring, much less commit a methodical murder-suicide over a 48-hour period. Vince, having already been through the roid gauntlet in the 90s, clearly thought that he did not need the added bugbear of CTE when he said, this doctor came up with this ridiculous statement of, okay, here's why Chris Benoit did this. There was some sort of trauma to his head and things were shown where Chris would dive off the rope and hit someone with his head. That's a complete buck. It looks like there's damage and there's not. We know what we're doing, we don't hurt each other. God love him. Stone Cold Steve Austin also came out and said, I'm not a CTE guy, just don't believe it. To be fair, the Rattlesnake also said, I worked for a long time. I got dropped on my head one time, I got concussed. But other than that, I can't remember having too many concussions in the business of pro wrestling. My take on that has always been, if you were just wrestling and you got a bunch of concussions, you're probably doing something wrong. He does make a good point with that last statement, but at the same time, any concussions at all is too many. Me personally, I've had 3 concussions in my entire life. One from bailing hard off of a rail that I was 50-50 in when I was skateboarding, and 2 of them from street fights. And one of the street fight concussions actually ended up giving me partial hearing loss, which has been getting progressively worse and worse over the years. And this was like 15 years ago that this happened. So concussions are a very, very serious thing that you can't just not pay attention to and then go off and get yourself even more concussions. Also, it's a funny thing for Stone Cold to just wave off, considering the fact that he is the reason that pile drivers get banned in the WWE in the first place. Regardless, Benoit had so much going wrong that we can't really know for certain which problem was the final straw that broke him. At least, not until that bald fraud Dwayne shows up on some random fucking podcast and leaks all of the details about how the whole thing is just a massive work. We are now at that point of the video where I usually go into the subject's legacy. But well, what legacy? Because officially, Chris Benoit has no legacy. He was completely unpersoned by the WWE. Mentioning his name there is forbidden, and there is no mention of him on their website anywhere that they can help it. Benoit isn't on the list of WWE alumni, but it's unavoidable to scrub him from the lists of championship winners because, like it or not, he is part of those lineages. However, each reign has a little drop-down blurb about it, and if we look at the World Heavyweight Championship, there is one blurb for Goldberg, then for Triple H, but none for Chris Benoit, nor for Randy Orton because he won it from Chris Benoit. But then it comes back again for Triple H's next reign, and then it's just back permanently because Chris Benoit was gone at that point. But some poor little intern might be about to lose his job because I did notice the little mention of wrestling Voldemort at the end there. Instead of recognising Benoit, there have been long arguments for Nancy being remembered for her own career and mark on the industry rather than just simply being Benoit's murdered wife. No other woman did the sort of character work that she did before or since, and she certainly deserves recognition. In fact, Mick Foley has advocated for her inclusion in the Hall of Fame, which I'm inclined to agree with. But speaking of Mick Foley, a number of wrestlers have donated their brains for CTE research, you know, after we're done with them, of course. And Mick Foley is one of them, but I don't think he actually has a brain at all, considering what he agreed to do for all of those years. Also, as much as we all love him and he genuinely seems like just the nicest guy, he is a white dude for Harris. Another was China, but after she got one road a decade or so after losing the game like all of you just did, fucking hell, that's an old one, her brain had decomposed too much for proper testing. And although finding Booker T's brain is an image of Stephanie Vaca doing her finisher burned into it. Not hard-coded by neuron pathways, I mean literally printed onto it like TVs that played Red Dead Redemption 2 too much. Of course, knowing what we know now, the welfare of wrestlers is taken a lot more seriously these days. As far as we know, the wellness policy actually does its job now. And even a top guy like Roman Reigns was suspended over something as simple as Adderall. Chair shots to the head were also banned and now go to the bag. The diving headbutt also fell out of favour, but like the pile driver has seen a resurgence here and there, mainly by Daniel Bryan and Chad Gable. But you know, El Grande Americano's been doing it since the 70s and he's perfectly fine. But I guess the greatest luchador of all time is just built different. So overall, the company culture is much better with greater awareness of and care for head injuries and everything else. So Boogie would probably argue that a lot of good came out of Benoit killing his family actually. Despite similar circumstances around her marriage, Stephanie has no need to worry. All Hunter seems interested in is killing the careers of Gunther and LA Knight.
Yeah!
Look, not only did you pick the wrong Uso, but the Bloodline era is over. Just give it a rest with the fucking Samoans. Just give LA Knight money in the bank and a world title push. And release that cuck Solo Sikoa so that Jacob Fatu can really shine as a US champion without all that baggage. And while you're at it, Paul, hear me out. So at the time of writing, Alpha Academy have just been brutalised by Rusev in the first stage of his Redeemer arc. And the New Day still have the tag titles. So the former should take some time off and take Rusev's lesson to heart, while the New Day keep ducking from and cheating in further challenges from American Made and the War Raiders. Then they take on Alpha Academy for an easy title defense, and Otis and Tozawa lock the fuck in to score a feel-good victory upset. And then they should have a friendly rivalry with the LWO for a bit. Otis is literally me. I'm his top guy. Oh, and also tell Yeet Man to grow the fuck up. Move McIntyre back into Raw, push Cross, and for fuck's sake, unrelease R-Truth. But I digress. The real question is, what about pushing Benoit? Because you see, over the years, there's been a continuous debate about ending the taboo and allowing Benoit into the Hall of Fame as one of the best in-ring workers of all time. For instance, Hulk Hogan referred to the aftermath of his 2015 Hot Mic Gamer moment by saying on Logan Paul's podcast, no less, if Chris Benoit can do the crap he did and the fans still love him, you know, they're very forgiving. While I don't particularly care about the Hulkster's views on race, it's wild how his crusade to make everything about himself drives him to miss the point as widely as he missed that fucking chair.
Oh, brother, you got me.
Hogan isn't the only one to bring up Benoit though, as the taboo has also been broken by the likes of Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle. The latter even openly said that Benoit was the best in-ring worker he ever knew, and that his best matches were with Benoit. Obviously, Angle absolutely condemned Benoit's character and what he did, but his candidness about Benoit's ability does raise an interesting point. I would be interested in Benoit being inducted into the Hall of Fame just to see how fucking awkward the ceremony would be. But the thing is, no one loves Chris Benoit, at least not anymore. The discussion around allowing him back into the history books isn't actually about him. The fact is, it takes at least two to make a match, and erasing Benoit buries the best work of so many other wrestlers. Granted, it's much harder to separate the wrestler from the man, like one can separate a character from an actor, but it can't be denied that Benoit was one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time. He's a part of wrestling history, whether we like it or not. And he's worth acknowledging just to give all of the wrestlers he put over their due. David Benoit would rather that this recognition went a bit further though. When interviewed by forward young man Chris Van Vliet, he opened up about his own view of his father, saying, "It wasn't him, man. It definitely wasn't. He would never do that. I know he wouldn't. I think something terribly went wrong. The doctor said he had CTE. That's what, at the beginning, gave me some closure. It just made my life a little easier. I didn't have to think about it. He had CTE. I don't think it was him." On a less dark note, David also recalled spending a couple of hours with his dad on Father's Day. "We were just laughing and getting ready to make plans for the summer. I got to say I love you one last time to him. It feels good to get it off my chest." Obviously, the consensus on what to do about Benoit's memory is very much against David. And as a father, I certainly have a lot of thoughts about Benoit Sr. that aren't particularly kind. But let's give David the benefit of the doubt here. He was young when everything happened and was forced to very publicly reckon with the worst situation imaginable. But at the end of the day, he lost his father, and he lost his stepmother and brother in the same fell swoop. He deserves the grace to carry that burden whatever way he chooses. And I earnestly hope that David is doing very well now. Clearly, David was not happy with how the WWE dumped his father in the memory hole, saying, "It's just terrible. I would like the WWE to remember him, at least for the good times. I want him in the Hall of Fame. But what he and Nancy's sister Sandra were really mad about was the fact that the WWE weren't there for them at all throughout the entire ordeal. Only Chavo and Jericho were. The company also put Jim Ross in an awful position because he cared about Benoit and was just as grief-stricken as anyone else. But because he was sent to the funeral as the WWE representative, he was made very unwelcome because the company basically used him for a walk. And I don't blame the Benoits and Nancy's family. If the company was going to spring into damage control mode to cover its own arse, it could have at the very least sheltered the surviving family from the media shitstorm as well. But sadly, only one person ever existed in Vince world. Alongside Chris Jericho, Chavo Guerrero and Jim Ross, David and Sandra participated in a two-part episode of Vice's Dark Side of the Ring, because if they didn't tell the story of their friend, colleague, father and brother-in-law properly, someone else would fuck it up. It's a tragic retelling and even tough to watch in places. But it's really nice that the documentary enabled Jericho to reunite Sandra and David 13 years after their grief caused them to drift apart. Rare Vice W. I genuinely recommend it. Contrasting the more nuanced view of the documentary, Paul Heyman, however, gave a heckling fan at a live event a